This is so crazy. The US has just actually done a bailout for Argentina here. They're going to print so much money for exactly the reason Bitcoin was created. And indirectly, Scott Bessent, the finance minister, is confirming here that you can now buy Bitcoin here. You can use the Exchange Stabilization Fund for that. This is just insane. And that's exactly why Archie Alden is talking here about the DB basement trade and making it clear why the dollar is going to hell here. Bitcoin is going to benefit massively from this. At the same time, the Bitcoin price is still moving sideways here, and we're waiting for the next breakout. BITW is once again confirming its price here, just like the US dollar, until the end of the year. And guys, if things keep going like this, it's going to get really, really interesting. Let's take a look at the whole thing, especially the statements here from Finance Minister Scott Bessent. Before we get started, you'd be doing me a huge favor if you could take a second to hit the like button below so this content can reach even more people. We're really at a turning point here, so I need all the support I can get. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit the subscribe button below as well. And as a small thank you, let me show you a picture of the Guardian of the Euro, Christine Lagarde, practically drooling as she reads in the newspaper this morning. Luxembourg buys Bitcoin, the first country in the Eurozone with Bitcoin exposure. Well, maybe she's not quite right with her theory that Bitcoin has no intrinsic value. Bitcoin's price today is pretty boring, just moving sideways. That's why we're going to skip all the Bitcoin price stuff and take a look at the macro level to see what's happening. Here, Samsung is saying it too. Reminder, the Bitcoin bull market hasn't started yet. In this price range, we're only slightly outpacing inflation. So right now, we're just moving sideways along with inflation. We're managing to slightly outperform inflation, but the real, massive bull run hasn't started yet. And of course, events like what just happened with the US and Argentina can change things here very quickly. Here's a really, really good tip. To experience a full Bitcoin cycle, you need the mind of a philosopher, the patience of a monk, and the financial pain tolerance of a psychopath. That's absolutely crucial. You don't just get the gains handed to you here. You have to do your research, read books, watch YouTube videos, listen to podcasts, and much more. A lot of leftists always think, yeah, those Bitcoiners, they just got everything handed to them, just bought Bitcoin back then, and the money just fell into their laps. No, it's a tough achievement to hodl through all of this. Very few people can actually hold on and not sell. I hope you count yourselves among the strong hands, so it's super important to hit the subscribe button below right now. And now we come to the crazy story about why the US is taking things a step further and buying Bitcoin. Unbelievable statements have been made here. First off, the US has entered into a currency swap agreement with Argentina worth $20 billion to revive the Argentine economy. The US is also directly buying Argentine pesos. Did you hear that? They're directly buying Argentine pesos here. And if we look down here, in black and white from the US Treasury Secretary, it says, to that end today we directly purchased Argentine pesos. And that's nothing other than a bailout package. They're sending money to a failed state to bail out the state. And that really shouldn't even be possible. That's exactly what Bitcoin was created for. Bitcoin makes the promise, no bailouts. If someone is too big to fail, if someone is in trouble, then they have to take responsibility for their mistakes. They have to be liable. In the fiat system, you don't have to be liable for your mistakes. No, you can just print new money, which indirectly robs savers through devaluation of purchasing power. And this newly printed money, just like with Lehman Brothers and many others, or with Credit Suisse and all the other bailouts we've seen, these exact same bailouts are then used to rescue failed states, failing companies, or banks. Slamming on the brakes now isn't even an option anymore, says Samsung MA. By that, he means the debt train, the debt momentum, which is really picking up speed now, folks, and things are about to get wild, because now Bitcoin enters the picture. So how does Bitcoin fit into all of this? And here we have some very important statements from Scott Bessent. No, that's absolutely not AI. Those are indeed his actual, genuine words.
This isn't a bailout.
Say to me, how is this not America first? I'll tell you why it's not. Do you want to be shooting at more gunboats like in Venezuela? We do not want a failed state.
Okay, perhaps you can kind of understand that particular perspective, but still, here's precisely where it truly gets quite interesting. Now, you've undoubtedly heard it. The crucial question was, so is this not, in fact, a bailout?
Want a failed state.
This isn't a bailout.
And now comes the definitive answer. Pay very close attention to this. Is this not, by any means, a bailout, folks?
Bailout.
Sorry, it's not a bailout at all. There's no money being transferred. The ES has never lost money. It's not going to lose money here. I was in the investment business, mostly currencies, for 40 years. You're supposed to buy low, sell high. And
did you hear that? Man, oh man. So here he says it's not a bailout. No, of course it's not a bailout if we just buy up the pesos. Because the Exchange Stabilization Fund, the ESF he's talking about here, will buy low and sell high. That means Scott Bessent just casually spoke straight into the camera and said, we can actually buy all sorts of different things here, such as Argentine pesos and so on and so forth, with the Exchange Stabilization Fund in order to make substantial profits. Break time equals 0.5s/. That means if opportunities arise in the market here, because he says it's not a bailout, and if it's not a bailout, then theoretically he has to buy everything that's undervalued in order to sell it later at a higher price. That means he would also have to immediately buy Bitcoin here. He would have to use the Exchange Stabilization Fund right away and buy Bitcoin. And we also know Boo Hines has already said, Dennis Porter said it back then, the Exchange Stabilization Fund can be used to buy Bitcoin in a budget-neutral way. And now Scott Bessent says here, we buy things that are undervalued, buy low, sell high. So we can also buy other things here that are undervalued. And what is the most undervalued asset in the whole world? Bitcoin. That means he has directly and indirectly confirmed here, yes, we can also buy Bitcoin. That's not a problem at all, because those aren't bailouts either. But of course, we also have to stay realistic here. He's obviously bullshitting us. So if you were to take his statement here 100% literally, 1-to-1, then that would mean we should immediately buy Bitcoin. But because he's bullshitting us here, you have to be skeptical, because he's just talking himself in circles and saying, no, these aren't bailouts, and so on. Of course, these are bailouts. And the truth is, they could do it. They would have to do it if you take what he says here literally. But since they're bullshitting us and lying, maybe they won't buy Bitcoin directly, but indirectly, or I don't know how they'll do it. In any case, it's all very, very wild. And here, Microscope, a very well-respected analyst in the Bitcoin space, also says, if the administration, Treasury, is willing to take aggressive measures like this, acquire stakes in companies, etc., what do you think they'll eventually do with Bitcoin? So if they're doing these bailouts here and at the same time taking stakes in Intel and Coinbase, I mean, they could just as easily buy Bitcoin. Or, for example, they could bail out companies that own a lot of Bitcoin. They could just go ahead and say, okay, here are companies that are undervalued. They're about to go bankrupt. We'll buy low, sell high. We'll use the Exchange Stabilization Fund and take some treasury companies or something, buying at a low price, and then maybe say, okay, this time we won't buy low and sell high, but instead we'll buy low and never sell, like they've decided to do with Bitcoin. And these are the questions that are coming up in the Bitcoin community now. If they can do this, then they can also take it a step further and buy Bitcoin. Max Kaiser also says it here. The US should be buying Bitcoin with that money, and Argentina should too. So you should use this money not to bail out failed states, but to buy Bitcoin. And then he makes it very clear why the dollar is going to hell now. The debasement trade is in full swing.
Not something, because if anything, gold is actually on the verge of flipping treasuries as the number one reserve asset. And so I think what replaces the dollar is not something that looks like the dollar, not like, China currency, enters an 80-year period of being the global reserve currency to the same degree. It's not like that. It's two things. It's one, neutral reserve assets becoming more relevant. So gold's the big incumbent. Obviously, we're both bullish on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a really powerful one because it's not only a reserve asset, it's also a settlement network. So some of the smaller ones are dabbling in that, Salvador, Kingdom of Bhutan, some others. And then two, more bilateral trade agreements. So not necessarily there's like some BRICS currency per se, but that, China buys agricultural products from Brazil in Chinese currency, or China buys Russian energy in Chinese currency. So China is kind of a big hub, but not to the same degree. It's more like with their own trading partners. And then to some extent, India and Russia have their agreements, and India and Brazil have their agreements, and kind of a collection of, not necessarily friends, but mutually aligned partners have more of their own kind of non-dollar trading situation. And so I think and I've been reading about this literally since 2020, is that we enter a more multipolar world. So not a single fiat currency replacing us, but more gold, more Bitcoin, more bilateral non-dollar systems. And the dollar still might be the biggest for a long time, but instead of being like the only game in town, it's like one of the big games in town. Maybe the single biggest, but it's a plurality rather than dominant.
And that's exactly how it's going to play out here. Scott, Besser, and company. They're going to try to really patch up the dam here, just like they're doing now, because the USA isn't just the USA, it's the entire currency area. There are also countries connected to it that use the dollar but don't directly belong to the USA, like Argentina, for example. And that's why, when these countries get into trouble, it's like patching up a leaky dam. You keep putting on band-aids, like with bailout packages, but eventually the dam will break. And when the dam breaks, the other countries will notice it too. For example, why is Luxembourg buying Bitcoin now and so on? Because de-dollarization is happening here. People no longer trust the dollar, so they're moving into neutral reserve assets. Gold and Bitcoin are the leaders here in the debasement trade. That's what Lynn is talking about here, because that's the first factor that's happening. The second factor that's happening is what's called lateral trade, meaning that countries like China and Russia are no longer trading in dollars, but will be trading in Bitcoin. We're seeing gold trading in other things. They're going to set up their own swap lines and so on. This will naturally push Bitcoin even further into the mainstream. And that's exactly what's happening, which is why you really need to pay close attention to where you allocate your money and which currency zones you're operating in. This is also confirmed here again by Matt Jugajan. Bitcoin versus gold, the monetary Cold War accelerates. Here we now see Matt Holgan, the CEO of Bitwise. Listen to what he has to say about his price target for Bitcoin.
To do records by year end. I think there are two things that are going on. One is that the debasement trade has become the hottest trade on Wall Street. JP Morgan is writing about it. Everyone is suddenly concerned about fiat currencies. And so they all want to get exposure to the two best plays in that space, which are Bitcoin and gold. For what it's worth, I think that fact accelerates into the end of the year. One thing people don't think of much is that when institutions and financial advisors sit down with their clients at the end of the year, they want to show them that they had the hottest trade of the year. Last year, they wanted to show them that they owned NVIDIA. This year, they're going to want to show them that they own Bitcoin and gold. And so I think that's going to drive additional interest. The second thing that's driving results is just flows into Bitcoin ETFs. We've seen $3 billion in flows in the first 5 trading days of October. That's nearly a record for a 5-day period. We think Bitcoin ETFs are going to set a record for flows in Q4. We're seeing Morgan Stanley and other wirehouses coming into the space. So I'm really excited about that. Flows in the debasement trade, put them together, and Bitcoin's at 125 and going higher.
Okay, Bitcoin at 125 and going higher. The last time I talked, I think that your prediction for the end of the year was $250,000. Is that still in play?
$200,000. Don't round me up yet. We said we said $200,000 in December of 2024, and yes, I still think it's in play.
Also, by December of this year, it's a pretty straightforward rationale. That's actually a really strong argument you're making here. And it's wild when you have these insights into how asset managers think. They just want to show off here too. They want to be able to say, okay, I had the hottest stuff, and last year that was NVIDIA. Everyone had to have NVIDIA. This year, it's gold and Bitcoin. If, at the end of the year, you can say, hey, I called it right, I was in on the debasing trade, then you have to stock up on Bitcoin and gold. That's exactly what's going to happen even more by the end of the year. Asset managers who don't have exposure yet will now also get exposure to gold and Bitcoin. And then, of course, we have the ETF flows, and all of this combined with the global shifts we're seeing, and so on and so forth. The debasing trade, that's what it's all about. That gets you to at least $82,000 by year end. Yes, that's a very ambitious target, and for many it might sound too high. I probably guess more like 105,000 as my base case, but of course, I gladly take it. And you can write in the comments below how you see the whole thing. If you don't yet have a way to buy Bitcoin and want to get set up properly, I'll put a link below for Bitcoin. Here you can safely buy Bitcoin. Use the code BitcoinHotel, and you'll get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. That way, you can also support this channel, but you can also buy Bitcoin elsewhere. The main thing is that you get involved. See you next time. Peace out.